Everybody in college sports, please put the pin back in the grenade. Please. SEC Media Days happening this week in Florida, and the story that comes out of yesterday's first day of action is that Commissioner Greg Sankey is putting legitimate weight behind the possibility that the SEC is going to separate from the NCAA altogether if they don't get their way relative to the act that is before legislators right now to save college sports. It has been kind of in the ether for a lot of this offseason that the Big Ten and the SEC may consider this at some point. But for him for Sankey to come out and say yesterday this is not just a threat to try and enhance a bargaining position, and the reporting from Heather Dinich of ESPN, quote, it's very real that they are considering this as a possibility. The quote from Sankey, this is something that has been going on for months because SEC presidents and chancellors have been talking about this since February when they met in Nashville to talk about options of self-governance if they cannot get federal legislation. That's where the conversations are now. Can we just figure out a system that can work for everybody? And
I mean, it did exist.
They're trying.
It was the NCAA when it had power. That's the thing. But
that didn't really work either.
It didn't work
for everybody except for the players.
Correct.
And they were the actual talent in all of this.
Correct. And they were benefiting from a essentially workforce that was free. Mm-hmm. And looking at it through that lens, like, it is absolutely past time that the athletes get what they want. Problem is, there needs to be an entire recontextualization of this in how a collection of leagues, because that's what it is. This isn't like the NFL was established and they're like, we're going to put divisions in, you're going to have all these different teams create their own individual markets. This is 5 or 6, and more than that, but really 5 or 6 bigger conferences that all own themselves, trying to create a larger ecosystem that everyone can benefit from, right? Mm-hmm. And trying to get everyone on the same page when 2 people specifically, or 2 organizations in this case, the Big Ten and the SEC, feel like they can just throw their weight around and do whatever they want. That's part of it. And the sad part is, when you look at that reality, it's like the results do also speak for themselves. They do have the best product of the remaining conferences, just in some totality. So it's either join us, assimilate, or not. Like, we're reaching that heat death a lot faster than I think we'd care to admit. It's not saying there aren't avenues for people to compete in other sports.
I'm reacting to your comment that they have the best product of all of the conferences. And okay, probably.
How often have you said in our discussions that the SEC should get the benefit of the doubt because they have nine of the best teams available? Because they play the toughest schedule because they play each other.
Right. No,
and it's the same thing on the Big Ten side.
I don't mean to, but that's the thing. Like, there is also the Big Ten, and the Big Ten is not speaking with the same vitriol right now that the SEC is kind of bringing to the table in this in their media days right now.
Sure. Give it time.
But like, can we just figure out a way to cooperate and not have this thing go completely nuclear? Because if they were to do this, what that looks like for any sport that isn't football and basketball is a really bad thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How they fund any of that, how they do anything at all, because there are certain protections that the NCAA has from antitrust legislations and things of those nature.
Things that are eroding quickly because they don't have legal standing, which is a continuous thing.
But the SEC wouldn't have legal standing. They would have to then find that, like, right now they are under the NCAA's umbrella. However leaky that umbrella may be currently, there is still the NCAA umbrella. The SEC doesn't have their own independent umbrella. But they'd have to fashion one.
They wouldn't be subject to the same rules, though, because the NCAA governs college as some totality. That's a monopoly. The SEC is competing against other entities that are similarly constructed. So they would not look at them specifically like, you guys are a monopoly, we have to come in with an antitrust legislation in this process. They're a competitor. They're competing for viewership against other folks. There might be handshake agreements to sit there and say, hey, we'll come out and compete with you guys, which they probably have to. But this is like the NCAA, we're essentially breaking up AT&T. That's what essentially is happening. And Southwestern Bell, if you want to call it the SEC, or however you want to phrase some of these conglomerates, like they feel like they can succeed on their own. Good luck, you know what I mean? Like, I've yet to see a circumstance where people either break off from something that is quote unquote successful in the sum totality and find their own footing, because I do feel like a lot of the SEC's pride and its success comes from the fact that they do have these competitions on the larger national scale, and they continually prove their worth. It hasn't happened in football in the last 3 years. If this was happening pre-Bama and Georgia in their heyday, there'd be a lot more weight behind it. Recently, though, it's starting to stabilize a little bit, and the Big Ten has more of a claim. And as you're saying, Big Ten is a lot more tethered to these other conferences in other ways. And that's not just for the fact that the Pac-12 was dissolved and they own a certain amount of assets on the West Coast. So there are elements throughout this whole thing that change the dynamics regularly. I think this is just the SEC posturing, but it does feel like we've all been looking for this. This is SEC versus Big Ten at some point.
It does kind of feel like even his statement of this isn't just trying to enhance our negotiating position, is trying to enhance our negotiating position. You're like, yes. It's not. But come on, like, I hope that that's all that it is, because if this were to actually happen, I think the end result is bad for a lot of people.
Yeah. But we've been saying that about different things that have happened in college sports for 20 years.
Yeah.
And they keep doing it.
Yeah. Again,
and it keeps getting worse.
Super conferences, bad for the sport. Bad for college.
It is. And it's
bad for the viewer. I shouldn't say it's bad for the colleges. It's actually profitable for them.
Yeah.
It's bad for us as viewers.
It's just interesting to me that at some point there will be a dissection between the sports department and the university. Like, if the University of Texas wanted to sit there and say, we are a professional sports franchise, essentially, and we have 12 or 15 offshoots that include baseball, volleyball, whatever, and we just exist as our own entity, they could do that. They have the boosters funding. They are essentially a front punch for something.
Texas could do it.
Yes.
Could TCU?
Probably not.
Could Baylor? That's the
Yeah.
Could some of the absolute zenith athletic departments in the country do it? Sure. Like, I don't even know if Alabama could do it, because as great as their football program has been forever, their basketball program's been pretty good again for the last couple of years, but that's about it. Yeah. Are you making enough? Like, Texas has the most financially fluid athletic department in the country. Go back to the famous clip with Lois Kolkhorst, the TCU alum, that was when she was questioning, why am I drawing a blank on the Texas president's name, Hartzell, right? Jay Hartzell. When she was questioning him, and he was saying, like, most calculations we're the number one financially for evaluate athletic programs across the country financially. They're number one. The athletic departments that are 1 through 5, 1 through 12, maybe 1 through 20, maybe could do what you're saying. But beyond that, I doubt you could probably even go to 20.
But you could probably create a league from those. That's the thing. The ones that can sustain on themselves get together.
Like Kentucky?
I don't know. Like, depends on what sport you're talking
Mizzou?
about.
Like a lot of these teams in the SEC, I don't think could do this.
Right. No, essentially what is happening across the board, and it's funding for all sports. When we're talking about sports, it's not just the football, basketball, the front porch of most of these universities. It's the trickle down in track and field. I'll throw like lacrosse in there, for instance. If you want to play collegiate sports, you need the funding and the backing for it. There just isn't for those smaller tertiary avenues.
So the fact of the matter is, football and men's basketball, and now women's basketball to some degree over the last handful of years, are the 3 sports that sustain, and I guess there's some college baseball depending on what program.
Sure.
Those are the sports that sustain the others. That's it. Those are the money-making sports, and all the others are sort of subsidized by those.
It's the way that it has worked since the dawn of
forever.
College sports.
Like, with all due respect, your water polo team, congratulations. Glad they're having success. They're a drain on our athletic system. They're being propped up by money.
They're a financial drain.
Financial drain, yes. But they're not a drain, but they are are something that we have to spend money on that we don't get back in revenue. If you were to look at it on a
spreadsheet, they're in the red. That's all we're trying to say.
They're a spend and not a rev gain, right?
Yes.
And so that's what I'm saying is where those other sports are basically allowing all those other ones to exist. The problem we have in college sports, and this is much more of a meta discussion that we'll probably have to have tomorrow or later this week.
See, we've been doing it all day, so why not?
But we only got 5 minutes left. But
Not even.
It begs the question of what role does college institutions serve in America anymore?
Exactly.
Are we sending our kids to go get an education, or are we going to go send them to pay tuition to help a football team make more money for the university, just to spend on more athletic facilities, just to spend more money on TV revenue?
And technically buy a lottery ticket to see if you can make it to, the plane of the NBA or the NFL or whichever professional league you can make it to. And that is a dream. It is a dream for a lot of people, but you're talking fractions of a percent that make it through from high school all the way up. That's just reality.
And here's the other factor in all of this that needs to be asked of the people making these decisions. Do you like every 4 years having a U.S. Olympic team that has success? Because that's the foundation for that is all of these Olympic collegiate sports that we have across the country.
Correct.
Maybe not in every sport. There are some where you're competing, like a gymnast, you're competing Olympically first and then in college. But for the most part,
track
a
and
lot
field
of these
for
programs.
sure.
Yeah, and it's not just us. It's internationally.
Yes.
Recruiting is international in those sports because they want to come to the best facilities here, and the best ones are associated with the weight training and everything else that are built through the foundation of football programs.
They need to figure out a way to do whatever they need to do, but still prop up all of that. That has to happen.